The South African Reserve Bank, has released its inaugural payment study report aiming to provide comprehensive insights into public perceptions and usage of various payment methods and instruments in the country. Now, this report aligns with the bank's Vision 2025 strategy for payments and highlights the necessity for the central bank to collect data on the utilization of the national payment system. Our economics editor, Tshepo, Mongoai, spoke to the Reserve Bank Deputy Governor, Dr. Rashad Cassim.
The advent of technology is slowly changing how consumers do their payment. And of course, the South African Reserve Bank has actually conducted a study in order to get an insight on consumer behavior when it comes to the payment systems. There are a whole lot of new products that are currently available, but obviously there's always will be some preference in terms of what is it that consumers are choosing when they are transacting. For more on this, we are joined by the Reserve Bank Deputy Governor, Dr. Rashad Cassim, for insight into this particular study. What are some of the highlights of this particular study?
Tshepo, the main objective of this study is what we call a kind of a study from the user side to understand how consumers in this country pay for what they want to acquire, whether it's a good or a service. Do they use cash? Do they use debit cards? Do they do internet transfers? How do they use it? Or how do they buy? So it's really an attempt to get an understanding of what exactly are the main vehicles through which users or households in this country acquire goods and services.
What did you find out from this study?
So in some ways, the study is not that surprising. We found that of all the people we interviewed, 98% of people use cash. We find that about 91% after cash, the second most mode of payment, medium of payment, is debit cards. And then we find, there's a big gap on how many people then use credit cards because, given the nature of income in this country and the inequality of income, credit cards are used by a much smaller group of our population.
Obviously, this is not pleasing for the Reserve Bank, given the amount of people who are still using cash. Do we know why so many people are still using cash, despite that you have a lot of technology in terms of digital payment and other format of payment that are available?
Yeah, so look, I think that cash will always remain. And in many countries, cash is important. So, for example, in a country like the US, cash is very important. In the country like Sweden, cash has become less important. I think that the important question that we are asking and we're trying to get to the bottom of from this survey is why is it that people are not using other forms of payment that may be more convenient? So what we discovered that people who use debit cards, which has become more and more popular. Many people use debit cards. So the growth of debit cards has grown. It's taken away some activity from cash. But I think that a few things. One is that sometimes many people feel that to use a debit card, you need a certain amount of money, you need a certain amount of collateral, which is not the case. So there's some misunderstanding on that, and that's one of the things I think we've got to educate the people that you can easily get a debit card, unlike a credit card where you need credit ratings and so on. But the other thing we also discover is that people have very limited resources sometimes. So someone lives in a rural area and to use your debit card, to go to a kind of you've got to find places that also use debit cards. So one of the problems is that people who use debit cards find that many little spaza shops that don't use debit cards. So I think that what we're trying to get to the bottom of is cash is convenient. People think that from our survey, people think cash is cheaper. Every time you make a debit card payment, although you as the consumer doesn't pay, the little spaza shop would want to charge a bit more because there's a little fee in it. So I think that if people have better options, cheaper options in using electronic payments through what we call quick response or QR codes, that may change the landscape. And we do think the landscape will change. We think that in the future there'll probably be more debit card penetration, and I do think that a lot of the decision that a consumer makes about whether they're going to use cash or electronic money will depend on what services are offered to them.
Are these trends prevalent across the income groups?
Well, I think that what you are finding, so not surprisingly, high income groups basically use, to a large part of their consumption, use electronic payments, ETFs, EFTs, electronic banking, and credit cards, Apple Pay, Google Pay. So that is growing at considerable rates at the high income level. At the lower income level, what is fascinating is the extent to which debit cards are penetrating the market. So even low income groups are very, very keen on using electronic forms of payment. So debit cards are growing. Hopefully in the future there'll be better options using their phones, mobile payments and those kind of things.
Just a final question. Clearly the trend tells us it's going to take a while before maybe half of the population actually embrace other payment systems and move away from cash.
So it's not only about embracing, right? A lot of it depends on the landscape of the national payment system. Let's say that from next year, we introduce very easy forms of payment for poor people with a little code on their phones, with a little app. That adoption can happen at a rapid pace. Part of it will be they want to know it's safe, their money is secured, and the transaction is complete.
Thank you very much. That's the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. Rashad Cassim. Of course, we still have a large number of population that are using cash, but of course, the debit card, there is significant growth in terms of that use. An innovation is quite important in terms of changing the current scenario. If there are people who can innovate in the payment system, we could see a drastic change moving away from cash.